Welcome back. So we could start working with the login, logout, but we need some kind of way to kind of continuously listen if a user is logged in or logged out. So I want some kind of function in the auth service that can keep track if there's actually a user logged in or logged out. This is cool, but it means that I would have to call the login function to get information or call the logout function to get the information. I want to have some way of actually continuously listening if there's a user available or not. So let's go back to the auth service right here, because now what we want to do is we want to add a new function called isAuthenticated. It's pretty much going to be a function that can explain to me if there's actually a user available or not. And this guy is going to return an observable. Let's just wait with that for a second right here. First of all, how do we actually figure out if we are authenticated? What we can do is we can call this fire auth, and then not auth, but auth state. That's the one we want to call. That's pretty much all we had to do. Now we actually can use this auth state to figure out if we are authenticated or not. So it would mean that we could do something like this and add a observable right here. That's what we're going to return from this method, or the property right here. That's actually an observable of a type any. So we could actually do this, and then we could start on every area where we want to kind of figure out if we're authenticated. We could start subscribing, and we could start figuring out if we were logged in or logged out. But we can actually do something even better, and there's a lot of ways to do this, but in my case what I want to do is I want to, instead of figuring out if we're logged out by getting an auth state, I just want to get a Boolean value back right here saying true or false. Very simple stuff. So I wanted this guy to return to me if we are logged out or not by actually returning a Boolean value. So we can do that by mapping our current auth state right here to actually return a Boolean value instead of the object it would normally return. What do you mean, Lars? Well, this guy, let's just figure out first of all what is this actually returning for us. Let's just try and figure out what we actually get back right here. So let me try and jump into the login component right here. And what I want to do is pretty much just call, like we've done so many times, the auth service from in here. I'm going to ask if we are authenticated. And notice the difference here is that this is going to be an observable, so I'm going to subscribe. I'm not going to use a promise like a then keyword. I'm going to subscribe. Now that pretty much means the same thing. Notice I'm going to do exactly the same thing right here. I'm going to return some kind of auth state. I think that was the name, an auth state, and I'm going to console log that auth state. So notice this is exactly the same like with the promise, right? So there's nothing here that's different. It's just that we're using subscribe instead of using the then keyword, okay? Very simple stuff. Now I want to do one more thing. I want to show you the error. So if there's an error, how do you handle that? Now that's a bit different, because in the way we're using the observables, we do like this instead. So let me just console log the error. Notice there's no catch keyword. There's just, with an observable, there's just two properties that we're setting into the function. So we either have everything goes well, that's the next keyword, or we have an error, that's actually the second property that we send into, or parameter that we send into the subscribe right here. And there's actually a third parameter right here that's called complete. Let me just add that as well, just to show you. And that pretty much just explains that we are now done executing everything. So let me just console log complete. Now the reason for this is, it's a longer talk, but the quick version, the reason is just that there can be many next states inside an observable compared to a promise that's only one execution. An observable can be many next states, and it won't until we're done calling all the nexts, then it'll call the complete. Just a side note, there we go. So now we are kind of subscribed to this guy, and we'll get the auth state out. I'm just curious what it actually is. So notice right here that when we're logged in, we're getting this auth state right here. There's a lot of information in here. That's fine, that's not a problem, but I kind of just want to wrap all of this in and make an easy isAuthenticated statement, just saying if this guy is available, then we're authenticated. If not, then we're not authenticated. Just returning a Boolean value instead of all of this junk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my auth service, and I'm going to change this guy using the map. This is the first time you probably played with the map. If so, let's just try and show you right here. Whenever you create an observable, you can start doing things with the observable before you return it. And I think this is the real power of observables. But to kind of use this, you have to know some things about observables, like you have to know that there's something called a map, for instance, right? And the map is actually called from a library called RxJS map. So you'll have to do something pretty crazy right here. Now this is stuff that you can Google, so it's not completely impossible to find help, but you have to know it. So I know that inside RxJS, the library that I'm using the observable from, there's an operator folder, and inside that there's an add folder, and inside that there's a map folder. I think that's the way you put it. Yep. So let's try and see now if we can actually call the map down here. Map. There we go. And now I should be able to kind of, before I return this, I can change what's inside it. So with the map, I know that what I'm getting from this seems to be what I could call an auth state right here. Auth state. Notice again, the map is just like the other observable. It just returns some information that I can now manipulate. This is kind of making a change to the auth state before I return it, right? So what I want to do here is I want to, instead of returning the auth state, I want to return a Boolean value just by actually figuring out if the auth state is not equals null, right? So if that is not the case, then I'll actually return the Boolean value. So it doesn't know about the map. I probably turn these around. Let's just try and change this back. I'll just return the add keyword here / operator. If this is not the case, I'll guess I'll have to Google it. But let's just have a look. That solved the issue. So again, this up here, the import, there's no easy way to kind of have this automatically imported right now. So you'll have to know the paths, and I'll start using more and more of these. But the map keyword is actually imported like this. So let's just try and run over this once more. What's going on right here? Before I do it, I just want to change one more vital thing. Instead of actually returning an any keyword right here, and return a Boolean value. And then I know now that it's authenticated is just going to return that true or false value here instead of actually returning an entire object. So before we actually end the lesson, let's just try and run over this once more. I know this is pretty complex stuff, especially if you're not used to the map. But think of it this way. I'm going to call this FireAuth auth state. That pretty much normally returns an auth state. I just showed that before, that it returns some kind of huge object. But I want to convert that object into something different. I want to convert it from an auth state or anything into an actual Boolean value like this. Now I do that by saying when you get this back, before you return the observable, I want to map it into something else, right? So what I'm doing is I'm taking the auth state that we're getting right now, the big object, and I'm just saying instead of returning the big object, return a Boolean value by just checking if the object is actually not null, right? So if the object is there, then I want to return true. If the object is not there, then I want to return false. That's actually how simple it is. We'll get back to the map function later, but now you've seen that how you can get it into your library, and you've seen how you can actually use it, but we'll get back to it later. But now we kind of know if we're logged in or logged out with the isAuthenticated function, and notice it actually listens all the time. So when I log out, I'll get a false. When I log in, I get a true back. Sweet! That's all I had to do. See you in the next lesson where we'll have even more fun.